emails, et cetera, saying that they're getting better service now than they did before the pandemic. So I certainly want to acknowledge that as we move forward. Again, you know, when the average for investment returns for the fiscal year is 3.2 and we came in at 4.7, I guess not only did the board put down the right policies and procedures, but the staff has been following it impeccably. So kudos to the staff and especially the leadership for making sure that we've kept the ship afloat and moving forward. That being said, we've already done the roll call. We're on item 3, the approval of the September 16th committee timed meeting agenda. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Middleton, seconded by Taylor. Ms. Hopper, please call the roll.
Margaret Brown?
Aye.
Lisa Middleton?
Aye.
Stacey Oliveris?
Aye.
Irena Ortega?
Aye.
Teresa Taylor?
Aye.
Shonda Wesley?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I have all ayes for the approval of the timed agenda. Lisa Middleton making the motion, Teresa Taylor seconding it.
Thank you. Brings us to agenda item 4, the executive report. Mr. Hoffner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before us today are several items, including 7A, which will allow the committee to take action on the CEO's fiscal year 1920 incentive award, resulting from the committee's closed session evaluation earlier today. We also have item 7B, which presents a subcommittee selection of a finalist for the board's primary executive and investment compensation consultant. As part of the request for proposal, this will include approval to enter into contract negotiations with the selected firm following up the subcommittee action. And lastly, there's item 8A, which provides information on financial interest and separation requirements for the Chief Investment Officer position. Thank you, Chair. This concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Seeing no questions, item 5 is the approval of the June 16th committee meeting minutes. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Approved.
Second.
Moved by Taylor, was that?
Yes.
Second by Brown?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in, Ms. Hopper, please call the roll.
Margaret Brown? Margaret Brown?
You keep muting yourself, Margaret.
Aye.
There you go.
Lisa Middleton?
Aye.
Stacey Oliveris?
Aye.
Irena Ortega?
Aye.
Teresa Taylor?
Aye.
Shonda Wesley?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I have all ayes for the approval of the committee meeting minutes, with Teresa making the motion and Margaret Brown seconding it.
Thank you. Agenda item 6 is information consent items. I have no request to move anything, so it takes us to agenda item 7. 7A, Chief Executive Officers Incentive Award. Ms. Tucker.
Good morning, members of the committee, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle Tucker, CalPERS team member. The board's compensation policy for executive and investment management positions requires an annual review of performance for the CEO. Item 7A is an action item resulting from the committee's closed session evaluation of the CEO's fiscal year 1920 performance. All members of the board were encouraged to participate in the committee's performance discussion. Based on the committee's closed session evaluation, along with the incentive metrics outcomes, the resulting fiscal year 1920 incentive award for the CEO is $94,884, which was calculated in accordance with the policy using the assigned ratings and weightings and her fiscal year 1920 base salary. Thank you, Mr. Fechner. Back to you for any action.
Thank you. So you have the information before you, board members. Any discussion on the situation and questions coming forward? If not, we can put this into a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Middleton moved approval. Who was the second?
Me, Teresa.
Ms. Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Ms. Hopper?
Margaret Brown?
No.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
We didn't hear you, Stacy.
Stacy,
Aye.
Moreno Ortega,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I have 5 ayes, 1 no by Margaret Brown for the approval of the CEO's 2019-20 Incentive Award. Lisa Middleton made the motion. Teresa Taylor seconded.
Very good, thank you. Anything else on 7A, Ms. Tucker?
No, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. We'll move to 7B, Ms. Tucker.
All right, thank you again, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. A subcommittee of the Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee met twice in August 2020 to set RFP technical response scores and conduct finalist interviews for the selection of the board's primary executive and investment compensation consultant. Today, we're seeking the committee's approval of the highest scoring finalists selected by the subcommittee, Global Governance Advisors, LLC, as well as approval for CalPERS to enter into contract negotiations with the approved finalist. If contract negotiations are successful with unsuccessful with Global Governance, then CalPERS would enter into contract negotiations with the next highest scoring finalist. So thank you, members of the committee. That is all I have for this action item, and I'll turn it over to Chair Fechner for any further action.
Thank you. So you have the information in front of you, committee members. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move approval?
And
Second.
motion by Taylor, seconded by
Olivares.
who was that? I'm sorry.
Olivares. Stacy.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, sorry. My video keeps going off.
Yeah, I was going, wait, I don't see that person. All right, thank you.
Sorry.
We do have a couple of questions here. Ms. Brown.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if Ms. Tucker can answer this for me or maybe Mr. Hoffner. I know we go into negotiations, and so I'm kind of wondering what happens. I remember last year with risk and audit, our number 1 choice, we couldn't come to an agreement, and so we moved on to number 2. I'm just wondering what are some of the issues that might keep us from signing an agreement with our number 1 choice.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I'm happy to sort of take on that question. So as part of this RFP, and we ask explicit questions related to terms and conditions, which are typically the things that might hold up a vendor from entering into a contract with us. So as part of the formal questioning, we did ask, I think the chair asked this question of every vendor was, will you accept our terms and conditions of the contract? And we got the affirmative that they would. So we had several vendors that indicated they want to make modifications or would suggest modifications, which would come after the selection. And you just never know if that's going to come, come true, that they can get to clarity there. So I think that's the typical thing will hold us up. I don't expect that to occur in this place, but we do have the provision in the contract and the language that would allow us to move to the second highest rated vendor based upon the scoring if we were unsuccessful with this negotiation.
Great. And they knew the terms and conditions. We put that out with the RFP, and they had to either
correct. That was all part of the materials presented to that was put out in the public space, and then they had the opportunity in writing and orally to respond to that.
Super. Thank you.
Yes,
Sure.
Ms. Brown, they all had the information. We asked each one of them the same question in the interviews, and they all agreed to it. So just so we all understand that. Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say that I had an opportunity to be part of the subcommittee that did these interviews, and I was particularly impressed with the public pension background of Global Governance and their response in the interviews. So looking forward to working with them and hoping after this morning, once again, being reminded that our systems for compensation are incredibly complex, and hoping that we can simplify this process moving forward.
Very good. Thank you. Seeing no other request to speak, a motion before you. Ms. Hopper.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Irena Ortega,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I have all ayes for item 7B, approval of the primary executive investment compensation consultant, with Teresa Taylor making the motion and Stacey Oliver seconding it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Motion passes. Brings us to agenda item 8A, information agenda, financial interest separation requirements for the CIO position. Ms. Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I think for item 7B, we did just need also approval to move to the second consultant if for any reason the first consultant was not able to, if we weren't able to enter into contract. So I just want to make sure that we have approval for that.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. We'll put that up to another motion. Anybody?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Middleton, seconded by Ms. Brown. Any discussion on that motion? I have Mr. Ruffino.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Which one? What's the motion? Point of information. Is that on A?
This is
8A?
right now we're on 7B. And
Oh,
that's
sorry.
in case we don't reach concurrence with the first one, we'll go to the second vendor.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for 8A. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, motion being clear and being before us. Ms. Hopper, please call the roll.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
Stacey Oliveris,
Aye.
Irena Ortega,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I have all ayes for the second approval of the item 7B. Teresa Taylor making the motion, Margaret Brown seconded, and that was if they don't reach agreement on the first finalist, they will proceed with the second.
I think that was Lisa Middleton.
It was Ms. Middleton that made the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you. That ends with that motion passes. Sorry, Ms. Tucker, for having to do it twice. Moves us back to 8A. Ms. Tucker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This information item before you presents financial separation requirements to be mandated for the Chief Investment Officer position. CalPERS is currently in the process of recruiting for a CIO and will require the selected candidates to sell any securities that could potentially give rise to a conflict under the Political Reform Act prior to assuming the position, or to dispose of those securities and place the resulting assets into a blind trust. This requirement is intended to significantly diminish any perceived or real conflicts of interest originating from such assets. Since the CIO position is currently vacant, this is an ideal opportunity to add such a requirement to the position. Thank you, members of the committee. That concludes this item, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Very timely. We do have a couple of questions from the board, but I understand we have a couple from the phone-in audience as well. So, Mr. Ruffino, you're first.
Mr. Chair, I can defer to the committee members before. I'm fine. What would you like for me to proceed?
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the treasurer commends the committee and supports fully this requirement for the incumbent chief investment officer, but also strongly encourage CalPERS to explore any additional staff to be included up to the board. So I know that in the analysis, it mentions that CalPERS may add additional positions at a future date. So I'm wondering when in the future date and what other, or how soon are we going to take on this review of what other positions we should add that would fall under this requirement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Tucker, Mr. Hoffner, you want to weigh in?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So I think that Mr. Ruffino. Michelle mentioned that we have the current vacant position that we're recruiting for, so that's timely. The others, we would continue to do analysis on the levels within the organization that we continue to look at the need for such a change. I think that may be a little more complicated, given those other positions are also filled. So we need to look at that analysis. We are looking at other systems across the country in terms of the reviews that they're doing in terms of blind trust and other similar type activities in terms of restrictions and at levels that they may be held within their organizations to really understand sort of the best practice approach associated with these kinds of provisions. So we'd be happy to continue to do that analysis and bring that back to the committee at a near future date.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Ruffino, does that answer your question?
Yes, it did, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Next I have Mr. Miller.
Yeah, my question is, given the depth and breadth of our holdings and our potential holdings, and how will you determine what would potentially go into a blind trust, or what would have to be divested in terms of what you would consider to be something that would be a potential conflict for a candidate to hold? And secondly, will there be any impact on our recruiting efforts from putting this in place? And I do certainly support putting something in place.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Let me take the second question first. I have been in contact with Korn Ferry, the recruiter we're using for this recruitment for the CIO, as early as this week, or as late as this week. I have not received any sort of feedback from them that that's going to be a deterrent to individuals looking to pursue this position. We will continue to work with them and understand if that becomes a challenge. But as of the last couple of days, that has not been an issue that they've raised with us in terms of this, which we anticipated would be a question that we brought forward. In terms of the level, I think we need to continue to do some additional analysis on, to what I mentioned to Mr. Ruffino's point, clearly securities and stock holdings, et cetera. But again, other pension funds hold different securities at different levels depending on the type of work that they're doing. So I think we have to continue to further analyze that and understand exactly what that will all include. But clearly your Form 700, which is a requirement for the state of California and state employees at various levels to include their financial holdings and what would that entail. Not knowing who and the types of securities that the individuals that are applying for the position will hold, I really can't say as to how those would be disposed or looked at, but that would be a further analysis to be undertaken.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that analysis is being thoughtfully considered.
Very good, thank you. Ms. Middleton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I very strongly support this move. I think it is important that whoever is this next CIO have an opportunity to fully evaluate every possible option of investment and do so without any belief on the part of the public that they are doing so in such a way as to advantage themselves personally. So putting things in a blind trust is something that has been done in other places and is something that we should be doing. We have an opportunity to do it now, as was said, because the CIO position is open. I believe this needs to be extended far more broadly to include others within the investment office, the executive leadership, and all members of the Board of Administration. I want to take the time to get it right as we move forward with this. And I think there are models that we can learn from to establish best practices. One suggestion that I would make in moving forward is we look at anything that would be required to be disclosed on the Form 700 is something that needs to be placed in a blind trust. And I offer that as a starting point for our review. But I will look forward to supporting this motion.
Very good, thank you. I have Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you. I support this motion. I think it's a great idea. We can avert similar situation. And as to going further into the organization for review as well as the board, I agree with that as well. But additionally, excuse me, it sounds like it supports this, so I am going to make a motion to pass the financial interest separation requirements for the chief investment officer position.
Okay, so you want to turn the information item into an action item, is that correct? Ms. Taylor?
Yes, unless it has to go someplace else beforehand.
Does it need to go anywhere else first, Mr. Hoffner?
I don't think you have to go anywhere else, Mr. Chair. I think the question is, it's an information item. It's something we're pursuing to do. So if you want to make it an action item, you can. Information items can become action items, as we discussed as well yesterday. I think the question is, we're looking to do this anyway. So do you want to, is this committee direction? It's an action that we're planning to take. I think the question that Mr. Ruffino and Ms. Middleton raised got a little deeper into the additional analysis and other levels of the organization. So I think that the question is coming back with additional information to this body on those types of answers to those questions that would still pursue the CIO restriction at this point.
Yeah.
I agree with that, Mr. Hoffner, and there will be additions later on, but right now we need to deal with the CIO piece. I think what Ms. Taylor is trying to put forth is we agree with the premise of where you are all headed, and we want to show, the board wants to show support for the situation, so we want to put it clearly out front and make it into a motion. So we have Ms. Taylor with a motion. Who's there, a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Taylor, seconded by Middleton. Any discussion on the motion?
Marcy has something to say.
Thank you. Chair Fechner.
I'm not voting yet, folks. I have other comments, so yes, Ms. Frost.
Okay. Mr. Hoffner, I think one of the points in the way that the information item is currently written needs to be clarified, that if the assets are transferred into a blind trust, they don't necessarily have to be sold and then transferred and then sold. So can you clarify that they're passing the motion that they wish to pass?
I will clarify my motion to include that if we can, Mr. Hoffner.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure the motion is clear based upon the comment. So essentially, I think to Mrs. Ross's point is they could be placed in a blind trust. I think the question is that there could be a belief that they all have to be disposed of, which might have a different connotation there. So I think that's the clarity you're seeking.
Yeah, I think do they have to sell the assets or transfer them into a blind trust? And one of the reasons that it might be difficult to dispose of those assets could be related to capital gains. So is the motion that you sell or you transfer into a blind trust? I think that's the motion before you.
Yes. So the motion I'm making then is to transfer into a blind trust or divest, because it's either one, from your holdings. Not necessarily having to sell to put into the blind trust.
Very good. Ms. Middleton, as a seconder, are you good with that motion?
I am.
Okay, thank you. I have more requests here. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask, do we need to include in the motion that staff will be returning to us with alternatives to consider for other individuals, including senior staff and board?
Rather than put that in a motion, I'll just make that direction to the chair, so it will happen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Ruffino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment is not about the motion, so after the motion.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Ms. Brown?
Thank you.
Yes, I have concerns with turning this information item into a motion. There's no research in here that talks about what other pension funds do for their CIOs or their executives. I read a story in Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal, I don't remember which, that talked about what other pension funds do. And I feel like this is a knee-jerk reaction to oversight failures. And so I really don't think that, I think we're way ahead because we haven't done the research here. There's nothing in here that tells me that we looked at what CalPERS, UC Regents, New York State Pension Funds, I mean, the Canadians, what do they do? And how will this truly impact our recruiting? And I think we need some more time and the board needs more information before we act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olivares.
Thank you. I think we need some expert guidance on this. So there's a big difference between disposal of an asset and disposal of an asset and transfer of those funds to a blind trust. And it depends on how the blind trust is structured as well. And if it's entirely irrevocable or if it's just irrevocable for a short period of time. This gets pretty complex. But I would say, as food for thought, if I hold an asset and I transfer it to the blind trust, I still know I have it. So there's still that ability of my personal holdings to influence my decision making. If I dispose of the asset and transfer those funds to a blind trust, and there is a trustee who manages those funds, and I don't know what that trustee is investing in, just that they're doing so in accordance with an investment policy, then there likely is not a conflict. But again, I think we need more guidance on this.
Thank you. I just want to point out the fact that I think we all know where we're headed here. We're going down this path, but at the same time, we don't want to elongate the opportunity of our CIO recruitment. So we don't want to keep pushing this down the road. We want to make a decision to whoever our candidates are, know clearly going in what's going to be in front of them, and we don't have changes as we go forward. So just putting that out there, that we don't want this to be a hindrance to moving forward with our recruitment process. Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fechner. I will agree that was part of the comments I was going to make, is make sure that we get this done. And I think the board needs to opine on it rather than have just an information item that this is what we're looking at right now. Additionally, I think Ms. Frost can answer some of those questions about what other pension systems are doing, because I know we know for a fact what UC Regents and CalPERS is doing, and I know we're ahead of the curve on that. So if you could open a little bit on that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Hoffner, I'm not sure what type of research you did in preparation for this agenda item, but Trustee Brown is correct that there was a recent Wall Street Journal piece where Ash Williams from the Florida plan weighed in. I don't recall the other plans, but they were the public pension plans that weighed in also. But their measures are far reduced than this measure that's before you as an information item. One of the options, just based on feedback, is that we could continue this research. We could make sure that the headhunter is fully aware that something with the financial assets of the CIO would have to be done. Give a little more time for further discussion on this, bring it back in November for an action item. Notice the agenda appropriately as an action item. I think we heard public comment on that yesterday as well. But I think we have plenty of time, as long as we can put candidates on notice that there would be some type of policy requirement related to their financial interests.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, does that change your premise?
I can withdraw my motion. I'm perfectly happy to withdraw my motion.
I think with all the questions are out there, that might be a prudent decision, and we make sure that we agendize this correctly for November. But as Ms. Frost says, in going through our CIO recruitment process, we make this abundantly clear that the board is looking at making alterations to our current practice, and there will be safeguards in place for the new CIO and more than likely many other staff.
Mr. Chair, that has been communicated to the recruiter. The agenda item has been shared. That has been included in discussions with potential individual candidates as they express interest in this process. So I think we're on that path, that they're not going to be surprised or unaware of what this board is looking to do in the very near future.
Thank you. Ms. Middleton, are you okay with withdrawing the motion?
Given the conversation that we have had, I am okay with withdrawing it. But I feel very strongly that we need to get to a place where assets are either disposed or put into a blind trust.
Agreed. I don't hear any changing in the concept here. So I think we're all in the right place. We just have to dot the I's and cross the T's. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I think mine was kind of a follow-up to my first question about how we determine what's potentially a conflict and what would be disposed of, what could go into a blind trust. And I think particularly Ms. Olivares' comments really, put a point on that. So I think I'm really pleased with the direction we're going now.
Very good. Thank you. So now we're back on the information item. We've exhausted our questions. We do have some folks from the audience that would like to weigh in. Mr. Fox, do we have any callers?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have 3 callers, the first of which is Tim Behrens with CSR.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon now. Committee and board members. The mission of the California State Retirees is to protect our pension and health benefits. I think this is a very good step forward. Any additional language that strengthens and protects stakeholders' pensions is greatly appreciated, and I would continue to support the board with whatever language it takes in order to protect our pensions. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Fox.
Mr. Chair, next we have from the California Special Districts Association, Mr. Dylan Gibbons.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. Dylan Gibbons with the California Special Districts Association. I'm calling in to caution you against putting any additional restrictions on future CIOs' personal finances. While I understand, I can sympathize with your concerns resulting from recent events, the fact that the events were discovered and an individual is being held accountable both financially and with significant damage to their personal reputation should be sufficient deterrence from these activities happening in the future. More significant, though, is how this proposal would limit the ability for CalPERS to attract best possible personnel for the position in the future. It's already going to be hard to attract the right person for the position. As a former CalPERS CIO discussed the challenges of recruiting talented personnel to CalPERS and away from the financial centers of San Francisco and New York, he stated, Sacramento is the intellectual capital of nothing. That was just to underscore the point. It's a challenge for CalPERS to get these talented folks to Sacramento. So I imagine the most qualified individuals would currently be using their investment knowledge to grow their personal wealth, and that's a good thing. To limit that ability beyond what is currently in place would likely be seen as a significant pay cut and would limit the applicant pool and likely result in regular turnover of the position, having long-term negative impacts on the organization and ultimately the fund. Now, I understand that over the last couple of days, the recruiter may have said that they don't believe it's going to be an impact, but that was just over the last couple of days, and I think more information needs to be gathered. I greatly appreciate removing the motion on this item and not moving forward and changing this from an information item to an action item, recognizing that not all the information is there. I greatly appreciate the comments as well from Board Member Olivares that, again, all of these items, all of their holdings being put into a blind trust doesn't change the knowledge that they have those items in a blind trust. Typically, blind trusts, where, when we look to the president and what they've done with that, it's in business holdings and the actions of the business, not in actually retaining stocks. So I don't think that it's going to accomplish what it is you're seeking to achieve, but at the same time, it would hinder your ability to hire the right people. And I think that hopefully over the next month in the research that is being done prior to the board taking action, that will be recognized. So thank you very much And again, I especially appreciate removing this as being going from an information item to an action item. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Mr. Fox.
Mr. Chair, the last caller is Mr. Bijan Mayar from the League of California Cities.
Good afternoon, Chair Fechner and committee members. Bijan Mayar with the League of California Cities. I'd just like to reference a couple of issues as you consider this and some of the other transparency and governance related issues you've heard throughout the week. Again, what it really comes down to, I think, from our perspective, is what was identified in the investment committee. It's an issue of reputational risk. I think all of us who have given public comment, all of you on the committee support transparency and support making sure that CalPERS is seen as an ethical and competent actor in the field. Now, obviously, there have been some setbacks in this space within the last couple of months. We still feel confident in the board's ability to pursue policies that support transparency. However, we would encourage you to think deliberately about what is the goal of the policy that you're trying to achieve. With regard to the CIO and what they should do with their individual assets, I think it's important to do research and compare the policies that exist at your peer institutions, but also recognize that maybe the policy doesn't need to be one size fits all for all individuals in the investment office. Maybe it needs to be one policy for the CIO and then another policy for other members of the investment office. And then beyond that, I think it would be important that for whatever follow-up action you pursue in November, for there to be a discussion about the existing policies and procedures you have in place to track when conflicts of interest happen. So perhaps maybe the effort would be better spent in strengthening those processes than necessarily changing the existing policies with regard to the assets that either the CIO or investment office staff hold as individuals. So I would just humbly kind of put that before you as different ideas for consideration as you try to put together a kind of comprehensive policy to increase transparency with regard to the investment office operations, which again is something that we support and we think is a worthwhile endeavor. But again, I do think it's important to recognize that take it slowly, be deliberate, and again, we appreciate information actions not being converted to action items at the last minute. So thank you very much, Chair Fechner and committee members.
Thank you. Mr. Fox, anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comment on item 8A.
Thank you. So I have Mr. Ruffino, I believe, has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if this is out of order, but I've heard a couple times make reference to a headhunter or some executive recruitment firm. Did we already hire somebody? Question one. And question two is if we haven't, what that process looks like, how we are going to review those executive recruitment firms and evaluate before we make a decision, especially, I believe it was board member Oliveras who made a comment at our last meeting regarding one of the recruitment firms that we used in the past. Anyhow, if this is out of order, that's fine. We can address it later.
Thank you. Ms. Frost, you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Mr. Ruffino. Yes, we have entered into a contract with Korn Ferry to do the recruitment for the Chief Investment Officer. Korn Ferry was selected the last time we went through this recruitment. And by all indications, candidate pools are being formed. And as was passed in the governance committee, and of course we'll get to Board of Admin on some of these changes, the board's role in interviewing the Chief Investment Officer. So yes, we are underway. Candidate pools are being formed. Happy to come back to you at another date to share how we do the Springfield pool, where we collect headhunting firms or executive search firms into that, and how we make selections. Selections are usually dependent upon the type of expertise that particular headhunter or that particular executive search firm has. In this case, we believe Korn Ferry has quite a diverse access to CIO candidates for our consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Frost.
Very good, thank you. Seeing no other requests, moves us to 8B. Thank you, Ms. Tucker, by the way. Moves us to 8B, summary of committee direction. Mr. Hoffner?
I just want to clarify a couple things. I heard several comments from different board members regarding additional research in addition to how this other policy should be applied to executive leaders, members of the board, others within the investment office. So at one point, Mr. Fechner, you indicated that would be sort of direction from the chair, but I want to make sure I'm capturing that all of those items, mainly from, I think, Ms. Middleton and Mr. Ruffino. And there was a reference to all of the items related to the Form 700 in terms of financial disclosure. So I just want to make sure if that's kind of the nature of the information in addition to additional research, we would bring that back and provide some options as to how that would look, I think, to satisfy, I think, the feedback I heard.
I think you're right, and if we don't hear further discussion, then I think you're on the right track. I see nothing. Okay. All right, brings us to item 8C, public comment. Mr. Fox, anyone on the line?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no callers for public comment.
Very good, thank you. So at this point, we're going to adjourn the Performance and Talent Management Committee meeting. Mr. Jones, 1 o'clock start for board meeting?
1:15.
1:15. Okay, long lunch today, folks. We'll see you at 1:15.